The empty seat at the table. Evelyn Carter adjusted her reading glasses as she sifted through a stack of envelopes on her modest wooden desk. The quiet hum of the evening surrounded her, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. She paused over one envelope, the writing unfamiliar. It bore no return address, just her name in elegant cursive. Her pulse quickened. A strange feeling of anticipation and trepidation washed over her. It had been 22 years since the day her husband, Martin, and their 8-year-old daughter, Lily, disappeared without a trace. A family trip meant to heal old wounds had unraveled into a nightmare that left Evelyn forever grappling with unanswered questions. Each holiday, each birthday, each ordinary day since then had been a reminder of their absence. For over 2 decades, she had lived with the emptiness they left behind. The envelope felt heavier than it should. Evelyn hesitated, the weight of past disappointments pressing on her chest. Over the years, she'd received countless leads, some promising answers, but all turning out to be dead ends or cruel scams. Yet something about this letter felt different. She couldn't explain it, but her fingers trembled as she slid her nail under the flap and pulled out the paper inside. The letter was short, only a few lines, but the words blurred as her tears welled up. She blinked rapidly to clear her vision, her heart racing as she read. Dear Mom, I'm sorry for the years apart. I've wanted to reach out so many times but didn't know how. I hope you're well. Please meet me where it all began. Crystal Point, Saturday at noon. No signature, no name. But Evelyn's hands shook as she clutched the letter to her chest. Could it really be Lily? Evelyn stared at the clock, her mind racing. Crystal Point. That place was etched into her memory, a serene overlook by the beach where the family had picnicked the day before everything fell apart. She hadn't returned there since the fateful trip, unable to bear the memories. Now, after years of silence, the letter called her back. The questions came fast and relentless. Who sent it? Could it truly be Lily? What if it was another hoax? She weighed the risks, her heart battling her head. But one truth stood out. If there was even a sliver of a chance, she had to take it. By Saturday morning, Evelyn was a bundle of nerves. Her sister, Maria, insisted on coming along, worried for her safety. You don't know who's behind this, Maria argued as they drove down the winding coastal road. It could be a scam, a trick. I have to try, Evelyn replied, her voice resolute but tinged with hope. What if it's her, Maria? What if Lily's alive, and she's been waiting for me all these years? Maria sighed but didn't argue further. The truth was, she admired Evelyn's strength. Few people could have endured the loss Evelyn had and still carried on with such grace. The drive to Crystal Point was both nostalgic and heart-wrenching. The cliffs, the ocean breeze, and the familiar winding trails brought a flood of memories. Evelyn parked near the overlook, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The sun was high, casting a golden glow over the waves below. They stepped out, the air filled with the salty tang of the sea. Evelyn's eyes darted around, scanning the area for any sign of Lily, or whoever had written the letter. The overlook was deserted save for a lone figure sitting on the stone bench facing the horizon. Evelyn's breath caught. The figure, a woman, had blonde hair streaked with sunlight, and though her back was turned, something about her posture seemed familiar. Evelyn's legs felt like lead as she took a hesitant step forward. The woman turned at the sound of approaching footsteps. Evelyn froze. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw the face she'd only seen in her dreams for decades. Older, more mature, but unmistakably Lily. Mom, the woman said softly, her voice catching in the wind. Evelyn's knees buckled, and she stumbled forward, tears streaming down her face. Lily, she whispered, afraid to believe what she was seeing. Lily rose from the bench, her expression a mixture of guilt and relief. It's me, she said, her voice trembling. I wasn't sure if you'd come. Evelyn reached out, her hand shaking as it brushed against her daughter's cheek. It's really you, she breathed. After all these years, I thought you were gone forever." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I never wanted to leave. But Dad," she broke off, her voice choking on the words. "Dad?" Evelyn repeated, her voice sharpening. Memories of Martin's calm demeanor and reassuring smile flashed through her mind. "What happened? Why did you both disappear?" Lily's gaze dropped to the ground, and she took a deep breath. "It's a long story, Mom. One I've wanted to tell you for years, but I was scared." "Scared of what?" Evelyn asked, her voice rising with urgency. Lily hesitated before speaking again. "Scared of what you'd think of me, and scared of what you'd think of him." As Lily began her story, Evelyn listened intently, her emotions swirling in a storm of hope, disbelief, and anger. The truth, she realized, would be more complex and painful than she could have imagined. The stories left untold. Evelyn's breath felt caught in her chest as Lily's words hung in the air. The wind swept around them, the sound of waves crashing below filling the silence. Evelyn glanced at Maria, who stood a few steps behind, her arms crossed, her expression wary yet supportive. Maria gave a slight nod, silently encouraging Evelyn to take the lead. Evelyn turned back to Lily. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I've spent 22 years wondering, grieving. I deserve to know the truth." Lily hesitated, her hands twisting together. She looked older, her once round, childlike features now sharp and mature. Her blue eyes, so much like Evelyn's, were clouded with emotions Evelyn couldn't yet decipher. Lily sighed and gestured toward the bench. "Can we sit? This might take a while." As they settled onto the weathered stone bench, Evelyn could feel the weight of time pressing on her shoulders. Lily stared at the ocean, gathering her thoughts, while Evelyn waited, her heart pounding. "It all started that day at the beach," Lily began, her voice quiet but steady. "You and Dad, you were fighting a lot back then." Evelyn's chest tightened. She hadn't forgotten the tension between her and Martin on that trip. They had been arguing over their struggling business and their dwindling finances. But she had tried to keep Lily shielded from their conflict, tried to make the trip a happy escape for her daughter. "I remember Dad saying he wanted to take me out for the day," Lily continued. "He said you needed some time alone to work on the business books. I was excited. It sounded like an adventure. He promised we'd be back by dinner." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I remember that too. But you never came back. The police said there was no sign of you anywhere. The camper, the money, everything was just gone." Lily's expression darkened. "That's because Dad lied to me. He told me we were going for ice cream, but instead, he drove 4 hours. I didn't understand what was happening at first. I kept asking when we were going back to you, and he kept saying, 'Soon,' but we didn't go back." Evelyn felt a chill run through her. "Where did he take you?" Lily's hands gripped the bench tightly. "To a small town in Arizona. He rented a house under a fake name. He told me we were starting over, that it would be better for us. When I asked why you weren't with us, he said," her voice broke. She took a deep breath, her shoulders trembling. "He said you didn't want us anymore, that you had another family." The words hit Evelyn like a blow. She clutched her chest, struggling to breathe. "That's not true," she whispered. "Lily, I would never." "I know that now," Lily interrupted, her voice fierce. "But back then, I was a kid. I believed him. I thought you didn't love me anymore." Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. She reached out, gripping Lily's hand. "I'd spent every day searching for you. You were my world, Lily. I thought I'd lost you forever." Lily's lips quivered, and she squeezed Evelyn's hand tightly. "I wanted to believe that, but Dad wouldn't let me contact you. He controlled everything. Our mail, our phone calls. He homeschooled me, told me not to trust anyone outside our little bubble. He said if I tried to find you, he'd disappear again, and I'd be all alone. Evelyn's tears spilled over as she imagined her young daughter living under such control, isolated and manipulated. Why didn't you run? Or tell someone? I tried once, Lily admitted, her voice trembling. When I was 13, I found an old photo of us. Of you, me, and Dad together. I remembered how happy we were, how much you loved me. I wrote you a letter and snuck it into the mail. But Dad found out before it even got sent. He burned it in front of me. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, wiping at her eyes. After that, I stopped trying. I was scared, and he made me believe no one would help me. Evelyn's heart ached for her daughter. And when you got older, when you were an adult? Lily hesitated, guilt flickering in her eyes. By the time I turned 18, I was so used to living in his shadow. He'd convinced me that the world was dangerous, that you were better off without me. It wasn't until I moved out a few years later that I started questioning everything. But even then, I didn't know where to start. Evelyn tightened her grip on Lily's hand. What changed? Why now? Lily looked down, her lips pressed together. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Evelyn. This is what made me finally reach out. Evelyn unfolded the paper carefully. It was an old, crumpled receipt from a storage unit in New York, dated nearly 2 decades ago. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the details. This is a storage unit Dad rented before we left, Lily confirmed. He never told me about it, but I found the receipt in one of his old boxes after he passed away last year. I didn't think much of it at first, but something told me to go there. Evelyn stared at her daughter, her heart pounding. And what did you find? Lily's voice softened, her eyes filling with tears. I found letters, dozens of them. All the letters I wrote to you over the years. He kept them, Mom. He never sent them. Evelyn's breath hitched. She could barely process the revelation. He kept them. Why? Why would he do that? I don't know, Lily said, shaking her head. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he thought he could control me forever. But finding those letters, it was like waking up. I realized how much of my life he'd stolen from me. And I knew I had to find you. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the ocean. Evelyn sat in stunned silence, the weight of Lily's story settling over her like a heavy blanket. She felt anger, sorrow, and relief all at once, a tangled mess of emotions she couldn't untangle. Maria finally stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Evelyn, you've waited so long for answers. And Lily, you've carried this burden for far too long. But now that you've found each other, what happens next? Lily looked at her mother, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. I don't know, she admitted. I don't even know if you'll want me in your life after everything. Evelyn's response was immediate. She pulled Lily into a tight embrace, her tears falling freely. Don't say that. Of course I want you in my life. You're my daughter, Lily. No matter what happened, nothing will ever change that. Lily clung to her mother, the years of separation melting away in that moment. Maria stood back, wiping a tear from her own cheek as she watched the reunion. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn's thoughts turned to the next steps. There were still so many unanswered questions, so much to untangle. And lurking in the back of her mind was a growing unease about the man who had torn them apart. Martin. If he had been capable of such manipulation and deceit, what other secrets had he taken to his grave? The journey to healing was just beginning, but Evelyn knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't let anything keep her and Lily apart ever again. Threads of the past. The days following the emotional reunion at Crystal Point were a blur for Evelyn. Her mind swirled with a mixture of relief, confusion, and a creeping sense of anger as she pieced together the fragments of her daughter's story. Lily, or Naya, as she had renamed herself during her years of isolation, had spent 2 decades living under the shadow of deception. Evelyn knew that even though they had found each other, their path to healing would be far from straightforward. Evelyn stood in her kitchen, staring blankly at the freshly brewed cup of coffee on the counter. The aroma filled the room, but her appetite had vanished. She had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying Lily's words in her mind. The letters, the lies, the years stolen from them. Her sister Maria walked in, carrying her tablet. "You've been up since dawn, haven't you?" Maria said, her tone a mix of concern and weariness. "You need to eat something, Evelyn. You'll need your strength." Evelyn didn't respond right away. Instead, she sipped the coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. "Maria," she began softly, "how do I even begin to move forward? How do I make up for all this lost time?" Maria set the tablet down and pulled out a chair across from Evelyn. "You start by focusing on what you have now. Lily's here. She's alive. That's a miracle in itself." She paused, studying her sister's face. "But I know that look. You're not just thinking about moving forward, are you?" Evelyn's jaw tightened, and she set the coffee mug down with a clatter. "No, I'm not. Maria, there's something about all of this that doesn't sit right with me. Martin was a good father, at least I thought he was. But what Lily described, the control, the manipulation, it doesn't add up. There has to be more to the story." Maria frowned, leaning forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with determination, "that I need to find out why he did what he did. And I need to know what else he's been hiding." The storage unit. Evelyn didn't waste time. The receipt Lily had found for the storage unit in New York became her first lead. After a flurry of phone calls, Evelyn learned that the unit was still active, its fees paid in full for over 2 decades. She booked a flight immediately, determined to uncover whatever secrets Martin had locked away. Maria insisted on joining her. "You're not doing this alone," she said firmly. "What if you find something unexpected or dangerous?" Evelyn nodded, grateful for her sister's unwavering support. Together, they boarded the plane, the receipt burning a hole in Evelyn's purse. The journey felt surreal. Evelyn had left New York behind when she moved to California, hoping to escape the weight of the past. Now she was diving headfirst back into it. The storage facility was nondescript, tucked away on a quiet street. Rows of metal doors stretched endlessly under the harsh fluorescent lights. Evelyn's hands trembled as the facility manager led them to Unit 1024, the number matching the faded receipt. "This one's been here a long time," the manager said, unlocking the heavy padlock. "Never seen the owner, but the payments come in like clockwork." The door creaked open, revealing a small, cluttered space. Dust motes danced in the air as Evelyn stepped inside. Her eyes scanned the contents, boxes stacked haphazardly, a few pieces of furniture draped in sheets, and an old filing cabinet shoved against the back wall. Maria grabbed a pair of gloves from her bag and handed Evelyn a pair. "Let's start digging," she said, her voice steady. "Unearthing the secrets." The first few boxes contained nothing unusual: old clothes, photo albums, and faded children's toys that Evelyn recognized as Lily's. She held up a stuffed bear, its fur matted with age, and felt a pang of nostalgia. She loved this bear, Evelyn murmured, brushing her fingers over the worn fabric. Maria opened another box and pulled out a stack of notebooks. "These look like journals," she said, flipping through the pages. "But they're not yours." Evelyn frowned, taking one of the notebooks. The handwriting was unmistakably Martin's, neat and precise. As she scanned the pages, her heart sank. The entries detailed meticulous plans, fake IDs, alternate addresses, and financial accounts spread across multiple states. Martin had spent months, if not years, preparing to disappear with Lily. "What in the world?" Maria whispered, peering over Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn's hands shook as she read further. The entries painted a picture of a man consumed by paranoia and resentment. Martin had convinced himself that Evelyn was planning to take Lily away from him, though there was no truth to it. He described Evelyn as a threat and unfit, his words growing more erratic with each entry. "This isn't the man I knew," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was controlling, yes, but this is something else entirely." Maria set the journal down, her expression grim. "Evelyn, he wasn't just controlling. He was dangerous." At the back of the unit, Evelyn found the filing cabinet. She opened the drawers one by one, revealing folders stuffed with documents, bank statements, rental agreements, and receipts for various purchases. But it was the last drawer that made Evelyn's blood run cold. Inside was a stack of manila envelopes, each labeled with a name. Evelyn's name was on one of them. With trembling hands, she opened it and found a thick stack of letters, her letters to Lily. They were marked with return to sender stamps, unopened and unread. Evelyn's heart ached as she realized how hard Lily must have tried to reach out, only for her words to be blocked at every turn. Another envelope bore Lily's name. Evelyn opened it cautiously, revealing more letters, this time written by Lily to Evelyn. They were filled with childish handwriting and desperate pleas. "Mom, I miss you. Why don't you want to see me? Dad says you have a new family, but I don't believe him. Please come find me." Evelyn's tears fell freely as she read the words. "He kept them from both of us," she whispered. "He stole years from us." Maria placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this, Evelyn. Together." The missing piece. As they prepared to leave, Evelyn noticed a small locked box tucked behind the filing cabinet. The manager provided a key, and Evelyn opened it with a sense of foreboding. Inside was a single photograph, a grainy, faded Polaroid. It showed Martin standing with another man, their arms slung around each other like old friends. The man was unfamiliar, but the backdrop was unmistakable. Crystal Point. On the back of the photo, someone had scrawled a date, July 15th, 2003. "Who is this?" Evelyn asked, showing the photo to Maria. "And why was Martin meeting him at Crystal Point?" Maria frowned, studying the image. "I don't know, but it doesn't seem random. Do you think this man has something to do with why Martin took Lily?" Evelyn nodded, her resolve hardening. "I think he does, and I'm going to find out who he is." As they left the storage unit, Evelyn felt a mix of emotions: grief for the years lost, anger at Martin's betrayals, and a newfound determination. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but there was still so much she didn't know. Who was the man in the photo? And how deep did Martin's lies go? Evelyn was done living in the shadow of her past. It was time to uncover the whole truth, no matter where it led. The shadow of Crystal Point. The photograph from the storage unit consumed Evelyn's thoughts. She stared at the grainy image late into the night, her eyes tracing the features of the man standing next to Martin. Who was he? What role did he play in Martin's disappearance with Lily? And why had they been at Crystal Point together before that fateful day? Maria found Evelyn at the kitchen table the next morning, the photograph spread out next to a stack of old letters. Evelyn hadn't slept. Her eyes were bloodshot, her coffee cup half empty. "Evelyn, you can't keep doing this to yourself," Maria said, sliding into the chair across from her. "You need rest. You need time." "I need answers," Evelyn replied, her voice resolute. She tapped the photograph with her finger. "This man, he's the key. Martin wasn't working alone. Someone else was involved in all of this. I can feel it." Maria hesitated, then reached for her tablet. "If you're determined, let's at least try to do this the smart way. Do you have any idea who he might be? A coworker? A friend?" Evelyn shook her head. Martin wasn't exactly a social butterfly. He didn't have many friends, at least not that I knew of. Maria pulled up an online search engine, typing in Crystal Point, 2003. The results were unremarkable at first. Tourist guides, photos of the scenic overlook, articles about local wildlife. But then something caught her eye. "Wait," Maria said, scrolling quickly. There was an incident reported at Crystal Point around that time. A man fell from the cliffs. The article says it was ruled an accident, but... She trailed off, reading more closely. Evelyn leaned over, her heart racing. "What does it say?" Maria read aloud. The victim, identified as Peter Langston, was a local entrepreneur known for his involvement in several small business ventures. Witnesses reported seeing Langston near the cliffs with another man shortly before the fall, but the other individual was never identified. "Peter Langston," Evelyn murmured, the name unfamiliar. She glanced at the photograph again. "Do you think this could be him?" "It's possible," Maria said, enlarging an accompanying photo of Langston. Though grainy, it bore a striking resemblance to the man standing next to Martin. If this is Peter Langston, then Martin was with him just before his death. And if it wasn't an accident... Evelyn's stomach twisted. Then Martin might have been involved. The search for Peter Langston. Fueled by determination, Evelyn decided to dig deeper into Peter Langston's life. She and Maria spent hours researching his background, discovering that Langston had been embroiled in legal troubles before his death. He had faced accusations of embezzlement and fraud, though none of the charges had stuck. But one detail stood out. Langston had been connected to a series of offshore accounts tied to shell companies with ties to California. "Do you think Martin was involved in this?" Maria asked as they pored over the information. Evelyn's voice was steady but cold. "I don't know. But if he was, then that means he didn't just take Lily to start a new life. He was running from something or someone." Maria frowned. "You think this was about more than custody?" Evelyn nodded. "It has to be. Martin wouldn't have gone to these lengths just to keep Lily away from me. There's more to this, Maria. I can feel it. A chance encounter." Evelyn and Maria decided to visit Crystal Point again, hoping to find clues that might lead them closer to the truth. The overlook was eerily quiet when they arrived, the sound of waves crashing below the only break in the silence. As they stood near the edge, Evelyn's mind wandered back to that fateful trip. She could almost hear Lily's laughter, the sound of Martin's voice as he called her back from the water. "You all right?" Maria asked, placing a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn nodded, though her chest felt heavy. I wish I'd known. I wish I could have stopped him." They turned to leave, but a voice called out behind them. "Excuse me," said a man in his late 50s, dressed in hiking gear. He looked at them curiously. "I couldn't help but notice you've been standing there a while. Are you looking for something?" Evelyn hesitated. I lost someone here a long time ago." The man's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that. I've been coming to this spot for years. It's a beautiful place, but it holds its share of secrets." Maria tilted her head. "Secrets?" The man nodded. "I was here the day Peter Langston fell. I remember it like it was yesterday." Evelyn's breath caught. "You were here. Did you see what happened?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I did, but no one ever wanted to hear my version of events. The police ruled it an accident and left it at that." "What did you see?" Evelyn pressed, her heart pounding. The man looked around, as if to make sure no one else was listening. Langston wasn't alone. There was another man with him. They were arguing, loudly. I didn't hear much, but I caught bits and pieces, something about money. A deal gone wrong. Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. "Did you see what happened next?" The man shook his head. "I turned away for a moment, and then I heard the scream. When I looked back, Langston was gone, and the other man was walking away quickly. I thought about following him, but..." He shrugged, his expression pained. "I was scared. I didn't want to get involved." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Do you remember what the other man looked like?" He studied her face for a moment before nodding. "He looked a lot like you. The missing link." Evelyn's suspicions were now confirmed. Martin had been involved in Peter Langston's death. But why? What had driven him to such desperate measures? As she and Maria drove home, Evelyn's mind raced. If Martin had been running from the fallout of Langston's death, then it wasn't just about Lily. It was about survival. "We need more information," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "Langston's accounts, his connections, there has to be something that ties Martin to all of this." Maria glanced at her, concern etched on her face. "Are you sure you want to keep digging? This could get dangerous, Evelyn." Evelyn's eyes burned with determination. "I spent 22 years living in the dark, Maria. I'm not stopping now." A hidden truth. Back in California, Evelyn reached out to an investigative journalist who specialized in uncovering cold cases. The journalist, a sharp and resourceful woman named Claire Thompson, agreed to help dig into Langston's dealings and Martin's potential involvement. Within days, Claire uncovered a startling detail. Martin's name was tied to one of Langston's shell companies. The two had been partners, at least on paper, shortly before Langston's death. It looks like Martin funneled a large sum of money into an offshore account just days after Langston died. Claire explained during a meeting. "If I had to guess, I'd say he was buying his way out of something." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you think someone was after him?" Claire nodded. "It's possible. Langston's dealings weren't exactly clean. If Martin was involved, he might have made some dangerous enemies." Maria looked at Evelyn, her expression grim. "This isn't just about Martin anymore. If those enemies are still out there." Evelyn's heart sank as the implications set in. If Martin had been running from something, or someone, then Lily's safety might still be at risk. As Evelyn stared at the photograph one last time, she realized the truth was closer than ever, but so was the danger. The legacy of shadows, the weight of what Evelyn uncovered was suffocating. The knowledge that her late husband, Martin, was entangled in criminal activities and potentially involved in Peter Langston's death left her questioning everything she thought she knew. For 22 years, she had grieved his disappearance as a tragic loss. Now she wasn't so sure. The mystery stretched far beyond Martin's actions. It was woven into the lives of people who were still out there, people who might still be a threat. As Evelyn sat in her living room, surrounded by stacks of notes and photocopies Claire Thompson had provided, her daughter Lily sat across from her, holding baby Hope. The infant cooed softly, her tiny fingers wrapping around Lily's thumb. Despite the joy of seeing her granddaughter, Evelyn's mind remained restless. "Mom," Lily said, breaking the silence, "you've barely said a word all morning. What's going on?" Evelyn hesitated, unsure how much to share. Lily had already endured so much, years of manipulation, estrangement, and confusion. Did she really need to carry the burden of Martin's dark legacy too? But Evelyn also knew that Lily deserved the truth, however painful it might be. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn gestured to the photograph on the coffee table. "I've been trying to figure out who your father really was, and what he was running from." Lily frowned. "What do you mean?" "He told me he took me away because you didn't love us anymore. That's why we started over. Because you abandoned us." Evelyn's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "That was a lie, Lily. Your father didn't just leave to spite me or keep you away from me. He was running from something far bigger." Lily's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Running from what?" Evelyn picked up the photograph and held it out to her daughter. "This man," she said, pointing to the figure next to Martin. "His name was Peter Langston. He died at Crystal Point, the day before your father disappeared with you, and I don't think it was an accident." Lily's face paled. "Are you saying Dad?" "I don't know for certain," Evelyn admitted. "But what I do know is that your father was involved in some shady dealings with Langston. Offshore accounts, fraudulent companies. They were working together. And when Langston died, your father vanished." Lily stared at the photograph, her grip tightening on Hope. "Why didn't he ever tell me? Why would he lie to me for so long? Evelyn placed a hand on her daughter's knee. Because he thought it was the only way to protect you. I don't think he trusted anyone, not even me. But now, Lily, we need to figure out if those people he was running from are still out there. Because if they are, they might come looking for us. A name resurfaces. Claire Thompson, the journalist, called the next day with an update. Evelyn and Lily met her at a quiet cafe in town, far from prying eyes. Claire was waiting at a corner table, her laptop open and a stack of papers beside her. I found something, Claire said, gesturing for them to sit. She turned her laptop around, revealing a scanned document. This is a contract for a shell company Langston and Martin own together. Look at the signature at the bottom. Evelyn leaned in, her eyes scanning the document. Alongside Martin's and Langston's names was another signature, sharp and angular. Alec Greystone. Who's Alec Greystone? Lily asked, her brow furrowing. Claire tapped a few keys, bringing up another document. Greystone is a name that keeps coming up in Langston's dealings. He's a shadowy figure, tied to organized crime and black market operations. I haven't found much about him. He's careful about covering his tracks, but what I did find is troubling. She slid a newspaper article across the table. It was a short piece from 2003, detailing a series of violent altercations connected to Greystone's enterprises. At least 2 of Langston's former business partners had disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Langston and Martin might have crossed him, Claire said. If Greystone thought they were skimming from him or betraying him, it could explain a lot. Evelyn's stomach churned. You think Martin ran because he was afraid of Greystone? Claire nodded. It's likely. And given how methodical Martin was about hiding his tracks, he must have known the danger was real. Lily's voice trembled. So, what does this mean for us? For my daughter. Evelyn reached across the table, taking Lily's hand. It means we have to be careful. If Greystone is still out there, we need to make sure he doesn't find us. The unexpected visit. Later that evening, as Evelyn and Lily were discussing their next steps, there was a knock at the door. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone. And after everything she had learned, her paranoia was at an all-time high. Stay here, Evelyn said to Lily, picking up her phone just in case. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A man stood on the porch, his face partially obscured by the brim of a baseball cap. He looked ordinary enough, but something about him set Evelyn on edge. Who is it? Lily called from the living room. I don't know, Evelyn replied. Stay with hope. The man knocked again, louder this time. Mrs. Carter, he said, his voice calm but firm. I need to talk to you. It's about your husband. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She tightened her grip on her phone, but didn't open the door. Who are you? What do you want? My name is Detective Frank Kessler, the man said, pulling a badge from his pocket and holding it up to the peephole. I've been investigating Peter Langston's death. I believe you may have information that could help. Evelyn hesitated, her mind racing. She glanced back at Lily, who was cradling hope protectively. I don't know anything about Langston, Evelyn said through the door. Why would you come to me now? Because new evidence has surfaced, Kessler replied. Evidence that points to your husband, and to someone else who might still be a threat. Evelyn's heart pounded. She turned to Lily, whose wide eyes mirrored her own fear. Slowly, Evelyn unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see Kessler's face clearly. He looked tired, his expression serious but not unkind. May I come in? He asked. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. But just for a few minutes. Kessler stepped inside, glancing around the modest living room. He took a seat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped in front of him. Mrs. Carter, he began, I've been working on Langston's case for years. It was officially closed as an accident, but I never believed that. Recently, some old files resurfaced, including this. He pulled out a photocopy of the same photograph Evelyn had found in the storage unit. This photo was taken the day before Langston died. Your husband and Langston were seen arguing at Crystal Point. Witnesses heard them talking about money. Evelyn nodded. I know, but my husband is dead, Detective. Whatever he did, it's over. Kessler's expression darkened. I wish that were true. But Alec Greystone, the man they were connected to, is still very much alive. And if he thinks you know something, or if he realizes Martin's daughter has resurfaced, he won't hesitate to come after you. Lily clutched Hope tighter. What do we do? Kessler's gaze softened. I can offer you protection, but I need your cooperation. If we're going to stop Greystone, we need to uncover everything your husband and Langston were involved in. Evelyn felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. She looked at Lily, then back at Kessler. We'll help, she said quietly, but you need to promise me one thing. What's that? Kessler asked. Promise me you'll keep my family safe. Kessler nodded, his expression resolute. You have my word. As the night deepened, Evelyn realized that uncovering the truth about Martin and Langston wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about survival. The shadows of their choices had reached across decades, threatening the new life Evelyn was trying to build with her daughter and granddaughter. But Evelyn was no longer the grieving woman she had been for 22 years. She was a mother, a grandmother, and now, a fighter. And she was ready to face whatever came next. The reckoning. The following days were a blur of preparation, paranoia, and fragile hope. Evelyn, Lily, and Detective Frank Kessler worked tirelessly to piece together Martin's secrets, unravel Alec Greystone's shadowy network, and prepare for whatever danger might come their way. The stakes had never been higher, not just for Evelyn's family, but for their very survival. Unearthed connections. Detective Kessler sat at Evelyn's kitchen table, a laptop open in front of him. His tired eyes scanned through pages of financial records and old police reports. Greystone is careful. I'll give him that, he muttered. He operates through layers of intermediaries, shell companies, and proxies. But there's one connection we can't ignore. What is it? Evelyn asked, sitting across from him, her hands trembling slightly. Kessler turned the laptop toward her, revealing a map dotted with locations across the country. These are all properties owned by entities tied to Greystone. Notice anything? Evelyn leaned in, her eyes narrowing. The map showed locations spread across several states, but one dot near the California coastline stood out. Crystal Point, she whispered. It's right there. Kessler nodded. Greystone doesn't just run an empire of crime. He uses these properties as hubs for laundering money and conducting illicit deals. The day Peter Langston fell, I believe he and Martin were finalizing one of those deals. But something went wrong. Either Langston crossed Greystone or Martin did. Do you think that's why Martin ran? Lily asked from the doorway, holding baby Hope against her shoulder. Her voice was quiet but firm, her eyes shadowed with worry. To protect himself from Greystone. Kessler sighed. That's the most likely scenario. But it's not just himself he was protecting. He took you, Lily, because he knew Greystone would come after both of you to tie up loose ends. Evelyn's chest tightened. If Martin was trying to protect Lily, why didn't he tell her the truth? Why lie to her about me? Fear, Kessler said simply. He was afraid you'd find out. Afraid you'd bring the police into it. Afraid Greystone would find him faster. Lies are easier than the truth when you're running for your life. Lily's voice broke through the tension, soft but resolute. I don't care why he lied. What matters is that Greystone is still out there. And if he finds us. He won't. Kessler interrupted, his tone firm. I won't let that happen. The bait. The plan was risky, but it was their best shot. Kessler proposed using the information they had about Martin and Langston's dealings to draw Greystone out. Evelyn and Lily would remain under police protection, while Kessler and his team worked to locate and confront Greystone. You want to use us as bait, Evelyn said, her voice sharp with suspicion. Is that what this really is? It's not bait, Kessler reassured her. It's leverage. We have evidence Greystone doesn't want getting out. If we put pressure on the right people, he'll show himself. Lily clutched baby Hope tighter. And what if he comes for us first? Kessler hesitated, then met her gaze. That's why I'm here. You're not alone in this. Evelyn didn't trust easily, not after everything, but something in Kessler's eyes convinced her. He wasn't just chasing a case, he was invested in protecting her family. Reluctantly, she agreed. The trap is set. Kessler worked quickly, using the photograph, financial records, and information from the storage unit to send a clear message to Greystone's network. We know who you are. We know what you've done. The response was faster than anyone expected. Less than 48 hours later, a black SUV was spotted parked near Evelyn's home. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras showed two men exiting the vehicle and scouting the area. They're watching you, Kessler said, reviewing the footage with Evelyn and Lily. That means Greystone knows you're connected to the evidence. Evelyn's stomach churned. What do we do now? We wait, Kessler replied. And when they make their move, we'll be ready. The confrontation. The night was unnervingly quiet. Evelyn and Lily stayed inside, their doors and windows locked, while Kessler and a team of plainclothes officers kept watch. Evelyn paced the living room, unable to sit still. Lily rocked Hope gently, her face pale but determined. Around midnight, headlights swept across the front window. Evelyn froze, her heart pounding. They're here. Kessler's voice crackled through the radio Evelyn held. Stay inside. Don't move. The black SUV pulled into the driveway, and two men stepped out, their faces shadowed under dark caps. One of them carried a briefcase, the other a phone pressed to his ear. They approached the door cautiously, as if expecting resistance. Kessler and his team moved in silently, surrounding the SUV and cutting off the men's escape. Freeze, Kessler shouted, his gun drawn. Hands where I can see them. The men hesitated for a split second before complying, dropping the briefcase and raising their hands. But one of them smirked, his eyes scanning the officers with unsettling calm. Detective Kessler, he said, his voice smooth and mocking. Always 2 steps behind. Where's Greystone? Kessler demanded, stepping closer. The man chuckled. You think he'd come here himself? He doesn't waste time on loose ends. Evelyn, watching from the window, felt a chill run down her spine. Loose ends. The words echoed in her mind. A twisted revelation. The briefcase contained documents, but nothing incriminating. It was a decoy, a distraction to buy time. As Kessler interrogated the men, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You've dug too deep, Evelyn. Stop now, or your family pays the price. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She showed the message to Lily, who gasped. Mom, they know us. Evelyn's resolve hardened. We're not stopping, she said, her voice steady. We're finishing this. The final showdown. With the men in custody and the text message traced to a burner phone near Crystal Point, Kessler knew the endgame was near. He gathered his team and prepared for a raid on a property tied to Greystone just miles from the overlook. Evelyn insisted on coming, despite Kessler's protests. This isn't just your fight, she said. It's my family's fight. The raid unfolded with terrifying precision. Greystone's operation was dismantled piece by piece, his enforcers arrested, and his files seized. But the man himself was nowhere to be found. As Evelyn stood in the dimly lit office where Greystone had orchestrated years of crime, she found a final, chilling piece of evidence, a letter addressed to Martin. The letter was short but devastating. Martin, you know the cost of betrayal. If you value your daughter's life, you'll disappear. Leave no trace. It was signed with a single initial, G. Evelyn's knees buckled as the truth sank in. Martin hadn't just been running for himself. He had been running to save Lily. His lies, his manipulation, All of it had been part of a desperate attempt to protect his daughter from Greystone's wrath. A new beginning. Greystone remained at large, but his network was dismantled, his resources depleted. Kessler assured Evelyn and Lily that the immediate threat was gone, though they would remain cautious. As Evelyn held baby Hope in her arms, she felt a flicker of peace for the first time in decades. The truth had come at a cost, but it had also brought her family back together. "You have your life ahead of you," Evelyn whispered to Lily. "And so does she." Lily smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "We all do, Mom, thanks to you." The shadows of the past would always linger, but Evelyn knew they had finally stepped into the light. A confrontation with the past. The letter Evelyn found in Greystone's abandoned office was the final, undeniable proof of what she had suspected. Martin's actions, though deceitful and cruel, had been rooted in fear. He had believed Greystone's threats, believing the only way to save Lily was to cut Evelyn out of their lives. But as Evelyn clutched the letter in her trembling hands, anger boiled inside her. "Martin gave everything to protect Lily," she said aloud, her voice wavering. "But in doing so, he destroyed us. He let Greystone's shadow dictate our lives." Detective Kessler approached her cautiously, his expression grave. "We've dismantled Greystone's immediate network, but he's still out there. He's not the type to let go of loose ends. We need to get you and Lily somewhere safe." Evelyn shook her head. "I'm done running. For 22 years, I've been at the mercy of other people's choices. It's time to take control." Kessler hesitated but saw the determination in Evelyn's eyes. "If you're serious, then we need to draw him out once and for all. Greystone thrives on fear, but he's still a man, and every man has a weakness." The plan. The team devised a bold strategy. Using the evidence from Greystone's network, they would leak selective details about his operations to the media. This would disrupt what remained of his influence and force him to confront Evelyn personally. Greystone valued his reputation, and exposing his vulnerabilities would be an affront he couldn't ignore. "It's risky," Kessler admitted during their final briefing. "But it's the only way to end this." Evelyn nodded, her resolve unshakable. "Let him come. I'm ready." The showdown. 2 nights later, Evelyn stood alone at Crystal Point under a moonlit sky. The air was heavy with tension as waves crashed against the cliffs below. The location had been chosen deliberately, a callback to the scene of Langston's death and the beginning of Evelyn's nightmare. But this time, Evelyn wasn't helpless. Hidden nearby, Kessler and his team waited in silence, their weapons ready. Evelyn clutched the letter she had found, the final piece of bait to lure Greystone out. Her heart pounded as headlights approached in the distance. A sleek black car came to a stop, and a tall, imposing figure stepped out. Alec Greystone. He moved with the confidence of a predator, his sharp eyes scanning the area. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice smooth and menacing. "You've been busy." Evelyn stepped forward, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I've had 22 years to think about what you did to my family. It's time for it to end." Greystone chuckled, his tone mocking. "End? You think you have the power to end me? Your husband tried, and look where it got him." Evelyn's hands trembled, but she stood her ground. "Martin's gone, but I'm not. And I have something you'll never have, a reason to fight." Greystone's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. Brave words, but bravery doesn't stop bullets. Before he could reach for his weapon, Kessler's voice rang out. "Freeze. Hands where I can see them." Greystone spun, but it was too late. Officers emerged from the shadows, their guns trained on him. Greystone hesitated, his confidence cracking as he realized he was outnumbered. "Drop the weapon," Kessler commanded. With a snarl, Greystone raised his hands. "You think this changes anything?" He spat. "You think I'm the only one. My network is bigger than you can imagine." "Maybe," Evelyn said, stepping closer. "But you'll never hurt my family again." As the officers moved in to arrest him, Greystone locked eyes with Evelyn. "You'll never truly be free of me," he said, his voice low and venomous. Evelyn's response was calm but resolute. "We already are." A new dawn. Greestone's arrest marked the end of a long and harrowing chapter in Evelyn's life. The evidence collected from his network ensured he would face justice, and his empire began to crumble. For the first time in decades, Evelyn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Back home, Evelyn sat on the porch with Lily and baby Hope. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the horizon. Lily reached over, placing her hand on her mother's. "It's over, isn't it?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "It's the beginning, Lily. We've finally broken free from the shadows." As Hope cooed in her mother's arms, Evelyn felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The scars of the past would never fully fade, but they had been tempered by love and resilience. "We'll build something new," Evelyn said softly. "For Hope. For us." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn knew they had emerged from the darkness, stronger and united. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family.